Well, anyway, I'd like to tell you that out there's a table filled with stickers. The stickers are gratis. Please take as many as you can put to good use. And good use means you put it somewhere where people will see it, and it will spread support for free software and the idea of freedom in computing. There's also a table with merchandise. If you buy that, you're supporting the Free Software Foundation, which is not rich and is not funded by grants from businesses or governments. It has to raise funds from people like you. And I have never received a salary from the Free Software Foundation either, because I'm asking people like you to volunteer to advance the cause. And at the very beginning, I decided I have to set an example by volunteering too. So I am a full-time volunteer, at least as far as the Free Software Foundation is concerned. I'm happy to receive money from anyone else who wishes to, but I never asked the Free Software Foundation to support me or my travel. It needs that money for other things. So, you've seen the overall story. That video is the most concise introduction I can make to the basics of the issue. Now I don't have to repeat them. But I want to tell you about the idea of copyleft, first of all. Now, gee, there's a clock there showing me how much time I have left, but I can't see the numbers. They're drowned out by the light next to it. It's totally, what? 75. Okay, can you move the clock to a place closer to here where I can see it? Like where you are standing now? Is that possible? Anyway, copyleft is a technique, a legal technique that I invented in 1985. I was developing free programs, and of course, they were all copyrighted automatically because of a very nasty treaty called the Berne Convention. Well, I knew that, and I also knew that I could put a notice on them saying that the users were, that if you have a copy, you're free to make more copies and distribute them. But I wanted to do a little more than that. I wanted to make sure that your modified versions would be free also, in the same way. If I just said to all users, you are permitted to make copies, make modifications, and distribute them, there was a danger. What if somebody redistributing with changes made use of per own copyright to restrict the users of that version? That would ruin everything I was trying to achieve, which was to spread freedom to cooperate. So I invented a licensing technique. The license, the GNU General Public License, says you are free to run this program. You are free to modify it. You are free to make exact copies and give them away or sell them. And you're free to make copies of your modified versions and give them away or sell them. But there is a condition. The condition is that you must distribute those copies with source code and under this same license, which means that every modified version has to be free also in the same way, or else whoever is distributing it is a copyright infringer, and the FSF or the copyright holders can sue them. So we found a way to take copyright law, which is a system designed mainly to give power to big companies that shouldn't have it. We found a way to use it for the service of freedom. And I called it copy left because if you take copyright and flip it over, what you get is copy left. So normally, all programs I've developed have been copylefted, but there are special cases where, for tactical reasons, it's better not to copyleft a particular program. If you look at GNU.org/licenses, you'll see lots of explanation about these issues. And by the way, in GNU.org/philosophy, you'll see writing about lots of other issues about free software and ethical questions. Now, it was predicted many years ago that digital technology, if broadly applied, would lead to pervasive surveillance and tracking of people. The first prediction of this, perhaps, was in the book 1984, where unless you were one of the masses of no interest at all, there would be a telescreen in your home which could be watching you at any time. Now that instead of calling it a telescreen, they call it a smartphone. And it doesn't always watch, but it can always listen. And I don't trust them at all. But in addition, they can track where you are. The phone network can track any portable phone. In fact, it automatically does. That's part of how it works. This is the first reason I refuse to carry one. In the US, you can still buy and use a phone anonymously if you pay for connecting it, but by accumulating the list of calls you make or receive, they will soon get enough data to figure out who you are. No thanks. Of course, the Snoop phones, the ones with programmable computers in them, well, the worst one is Apple. You can install any program that Apple approves of, and its conditions are very strict. It has to be malicious, or Apple won't stand for it. I consider all those things Orwellian, and I don't want them. Now, another thing that was predicted, I think it was around 1972, some academicians wrote that if people adopted a digital system for payments and used it most of the time, this would effectively allow tracking everything everybody does. Well, before I saw that article, I could see it was the case. Even using bank cards has that effect. So around 20 or so years ago, I realized it was a bad idea to use them, and I stopped ever using them. So since then, I always pay cash. Each day before I go out, I make sure I have enough money. And I do have an ATM card. So if I wanted to buy something and it costs too much, that doesn't mean I have to use a bank card to buy it. It's much better for your privacy if you get cash out of a machine and then take the cash to the store and pay. The machine, of course, reports where you were when you took out money, but it doesn't know what you're going to buy with that money. And you can get out enough money for several days and not use the machine again for a while. It's up to us to protect our freedom. So when we see changes being pushed on society that lead to having less freedom and more government control, it's incumbent on us to resist, to refuse, because this is part of how we contribute to making the future whatever it's going to be. It can either be an Orwellian future, or it can be a freedom-respecting future. And if we want it to be freedom-respecting, we have to fight for it. Using free software is one of the ways you can fight for it. Now, the video explains why schools should use and teach only free software. I suspect, though, that some of the classes in this university presume that students are running non-free software. That is very bad. If a school leads its students to use Zoom or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams, well, they're all basically equivalent. They involve non-free client software that can snoop on the users. Now, why is it that non-free software tends to snoop on people? Because every non-free program is controlled by somebody, typically a company, not a somebody really, just an entity. And they are tempted, very strongly tempted, to design those programs to mistreat the users. The users are captive victims. And they have people whose job is to cleverly think of new ways to use that power to gain at their expense, at the expense of those users that the company claims to be serving. And to resist it, the first step is don't use that stuff. Now, people have found it's possible to cross-link free group communication programs with the non-free ones using the share screen feature. You can share, consider Zoom, for example, and consider something like GNU Jammy or Galen or any free program for communication. Jitsi Meet would do it. The point is, you can share screen between them so that whatever people are saying and showing in one program can be seen in the other. This way, students themselves can, somebody who is running Microsoft Teams can run a free program also and gateway the two, and then those students who want to refuse to run the non-free programs can join the free software meeting and get to see what the teacher and other students are saying in the user subjugating meeting, and vice versa. This is something you can easily try in order to help other students in your school keep their freedom until the day that you convince the school to change over and to stop recommending non-free software as the default. Now, another thing that pushes non-free software on people is a lot of websites. Nowadays, it's very common for websites to operate by sending JavaScript programs to the user, and a lot of those programs are non-free, and in other cases, they may be free in the source code, but what you get doesn't show the source code. What comes into your browser doesn't show the source code, doesn't show the license, so for you it might as well be non-free. My browser is set up with Libre.js so that things like that won't run. And the reason is, if I want to look at a website and my choice is either run its non-free software or I can't see it, I choose I can't see it because my freedom is more important to me than seeing that website. Think about it. What you choose in your life depends on your values. How much do you value freedom? We know how much the government of India values your freedom because it has set up Aadhaar. Originally, it was supposed to be voluntary for people, but they have loaded requirements onto it to the point where everybody thinks, I have no choice. I have no choice. And that's the way freedom is taken away. In every country in the world now, we need to resist the tendency of our own governments to track us and restrict us. Another important issue is what about the so-called artificial intelligence? It's interesting. There are some examples that I consider really artificial intelligence. They tend to be in limited domains. For instance, there are programs which can examine an image of a sample of tissue and tell you, is it cancerous or not? A very limited domain, but in that domain, they can do as good a job as a human doctor, a specialist human doctor who does that as a professionally can't outdo the program, and maybe the program is even better. Well, that's good. That's an advance. It enables medicine to do better treatment of patients. But when people think of the term, quote, artificial intelligence, unquote, they don't think of things like that. They usually think of the bullshit generators, programs like ChatGPT, which do not deserve the term intelligence. I define intelligence as the ability to know and understand things. Again, that could be within a limited domain. The point is, though, that those programs can't know anything and can't understand anything. They are not designed to be able to understand and know things. They only know how to play with sentences. Take a little of that one and tack on a little of that one, and that one, a little of that one, and you come out with something that's sort of a mishmash. And at no point does it ever understand any of those sentences. It only knows which ones seem to fit together better. So the result is a statement which might be true. In simple cases, it's usually true, but sometimes it's false, and the program has no idea which means that you cannot trust the output of those programs. I suggest that as a safety measure, anyone transmitting the output of a bullshit generator should be required to label it as output from a bullshit generator, meaning don't trust this. Don't assume that the things it takes for granted have anything to do with the truth. And the reason I call it that, bullshit generator, is that bullshit in philosophical literature has a definition. It's statements generated with indifference to the truth, meaning whatever's coming up with the things to say is paying no attention to what is true and what is false. And that, we know, describes those programs, because they don't have the ability to understand truth and falsehood. They couldn't possibly ever do better. Now, a human being of normal mental capacity can do better. So when a human is bullshitting, that's a decision. What are you doing?
I was keeping a piece of...
Oh, okay. Thank you. I don't need cookies for here. I'm not going to take time to eat while I'm talking to you with a limited amount of time. But in any case, thank you. Never mind. So, in any case, thank you. So if a human being is bullshitting, that's a moral wrong. That is doing wrong to the people being spoken to. So when I refer to Trump as the bullshitter, that's my first moral condemnation of him. I have many others to add now. But you can't blame a computer program for bullshitting when it has no ability to do anything else. And indeed, sometimes what those programs output is true. A clock moving backwards will be right 4 times a day. So rejoice when that happens, but don't ever expect the output to be true. And I would suggest that the school adopt a similar rule. Anything that the students say to the school, or anything that is published or shown to anyone outside that it was generated partially by a bullshit generator, should be labeled that way. Watch out, this was generated by such and such. Parts of it may be false. This will help the public learn to understand what those programs really do. And another important thing is to firmly refuse ever to refer to them as, quote, artificial intelligence, unquote. The term artificial stupidity is more accurate. But that marketing term, and there's a giant marketing campaign that has pressured the public and the media to use the term, quote, artificial intelligence, unquote, for them, has been very effective. And that's why the public believes that those programs know and understand things. That's why people tend to assume that those programs are somehow thinking when we know they are not. Maybe someday there will be a real artificial intelligence that can understand things at least as well as a stupid human can, and that might merit the term artificial intelligence. But we should insist on waiting for that before we use the term. So as you can hear, I am very careful never to support that misleading marketing term. And I recommend that you take a careful look at the marketing promotion terms that are being used to shape how people think, and think about how you are going to communicate to others that you reject them, and remove from yourself the kinds of thinking that they have taught you to do. And if you want to do computing that you can trust, I suggest that you move to free software. Even if you don't move 100%, every step away from non-free software is a step forward. Saying no, even once, to non-free software is helping our cause. And when you say no a second time, well, that's more help. What does that clock say? I can't see those numbers. They're very dim. What? 5-3. So it's basically it's time for the auction. I have here an adorable GNU that needs a home. It's very adorable. And I'll sign the card for you if you buy it, if you wish it to be signed. But these GNUs are rather expensive. However, this is one of the few old ones left, and they were not so expensive. So I'm going to start I hope someone here can afford enough with 60,000 rupees. We've got to raise money this way, and if I don't sell it now, I can sell it later some other place. So, when you bid, please raise your arm and wave it and shout the amount, because I've got to notice that you're bidding. And in fact, if people could turn those lights off for right now, I could see people in the audience better. It's almost impossible. Let's see if I just walk over here, if that helps. Yes, it does help. Oh, thank you. So, do I get an offer of 60,000 rupees for this adorable GNU? Wait a second, no, it shouldn't be. I may have put in an extra zero. I'm always getting confused in this. Yes, sorry, 6,000 rupees. I get confused. So, yeah, 100, yes, 6,000 rupees. Sorry, which is around $60. Do I get 6,000 rupees for this adorable GNU? Are you bidding? When you bid, yell, shout. Okay, I've got 6,000. Do I get 6,500? Do I get 6,500 for this adorable GNU? 6,500 or more. Any other bids? Going, gone for 6,000. Please come up and pay. I can't hear you at all. Please speak loud for me.
Can I use any Google Pay? Can I use Google Pay?
I can't. You can't because I can't. It's non-free software. Okay. So I can't use that. But if some of the staff here are willing to convert that into a payment, yes. So you can do it with him. And when that's done, like at the end of the talk, then we'll finish it up. Thank you. Anyway, boy, that was an embarrassing mistake, adding that extra zero, which I didn't realize. I was just making a mistake. So now it's time for questions. The idea is you write questions on pieces of paper. I hope people have been distributing pieces of paper so that everyone can ask questions. Have people got their papers? So just write questions on paper. And you can have more paper, so you can hand in 1 or 2 questions and then get another paper and write more questions. That way I'll get questions very soon and I can start answering them. I do it this way because it's more efficient. I can answer far more questions per hour, like 3 or 5 times as many questions per hour. I want to answer all your questions.
If there's anybody who hasn't received bits of paper, please do raise your hands. Volunteers will come to you, but then I'm aware that most of you have it. So please write down your questions and hand them back over to the volunteers who will bring it to the stage. There are some raised hands. We request the volunteers to share more pieces of paper. The ones that have been collected already, can we have them handed over to Dr. Stallman on stage?
Yeah, I might as well overlap these operations.
Yes. A couple of volunteers who already have questions with you, please bring them onto the stage. And the others can probably do the distribution of more paper. It would be great if you can write down your name as well. And
no need to write your name.
Okay, great.
I don't care who asked the question, unless there's something utterly stupid or nasty about it, I'll just answer it.
Yes, it's the question.
It's the easiest thing. And you can bring them to me several at once. You don't have to give them to me one by one. I can do that faster. What impact would widespread adoption of free software have on the growth of the software industry? I couldn't give a damn. The size of the software industry is insignificant compared with the freedom of people in society. Now, part of the reason things are going in such a bad direction is that people have come to emphasize the wrong values. Our future depends above all on what we value. People who value the income of a certain sector of society more than whether we respect each other's freedom, more than whether we get together to demand freedom, are playing a foolish game, taking a terrible risk for everyone. So let's learn not to make that mistake. Particularly considering the role of financial incentives as a key motivator in software development. Perhaps we should stop paying money to people who are making society worse by taking away the freedom of those who are foolish enough to fall into the trap. I'm talking about developers of non-free software. In general, I don't give them a cent because I won't run that software. Tech industry leaders like someone I don't know have predicted that so-called artificial intelligence will increasingly displace coding jobs. If they are absolute fools, if whoever wants the program developed is willing to have it be utterly full of obvious bugs, then sure, you can use a bullshit generator to write the code. I'm afraid that this person has either fallen for their own misleading propaganda or is just trying to push for it based on a presumption about the future. Do you think that AI will decrease freedom? Yes, then he says chat GPT. So he's clearly talking about bullshit generators, which are also non-free. In fact, they're examples of service as a software substitute. If you could have a copy of the program and run it yourself, it might give you stupid results just like today's systems, but at least it wouldn't directly deprive you of freedom. But the programs that actually run in somebody's server, not on your machine, well, that somebody actually controls what the computation does. So they are the equivalent of a non-free program. A non-free program means you can get a copy and install it and run it, but you can't control how it's going to work. But with service as a software substitute, you can't even get the copy. You don't even have a binary, much less the source code. And so the processing of your data that you send is done in someone else's server, and you have absolutely no control over how it's going to be processed. So that's morally the equivalent of non-free programs. So do I think this will decrease freedom? Well, yes, to the extent that you make the mistake of using it. And likewise, a cashless society, well, the payment programs are all non-free, and they track people, so I never do that. There are lots of free software derivatives like open source / open core / free and open source, et cetera, et cetera. What are the differences? First of all, Free Libre software is just another way, it's a way of clarifying the term free software. It means the same exact thing. And I sometimes call it Libre software or Swatantra software or Mukt software. There's just ways of emphasizing we're not talking about price. And in whatever country I visit, I will probably learn the local way to say free in the sense of freedom, and I'll use that word. And that's the word you should use when you're speaking in that language or writing in that language. The point is to communicate to people clearly that the issue here is freedom, not price. Open source is a different matter. The term open source was coined in 1998 as a way of supporting the practices of free software, but rejecting the philosophy, rejecting the values, valuing freedom and cooperation rather than profit. This is not to say that we forbid making any money. The point is, it's okay to make some money from what you're doing, but you've got to respect people's freedom or what you're doing becomes wrong. So just making money is not wrong in itself. So if someone releases a program and says this is open source, most of the time that program is free software, which means it's a good thing. The program itself is, if it's free, it's equally good whether they say free software or say open source, whatever they say. If the program respects users' freedom, it's good. But it does matter what people communicate to other people. There's a big difference between saying this program is open source, the users can improve it and change it, versus saying this program respects your freedom and therefore you can improve it and change it. What about a software like OpenDRM? Well, since I hate DRM, DRM stands for Digital Restrictions Management. It's the software that restricts what users can do with the information such as a recording of music, video, or a book. My attitude towards DRM is it is specifically evil software, and I won't run it. So if some kind of media is available to me, but only with DRM, I say no thanks. I won't take it, because I won't run the non-free software required to look at it or listen to it, so it does me no good at all. Now, in some cases, there's free software that can break the DRM, the digital handcuffs on that work. And if someone would like to break the DRM for me, then the result could become morally acceptable, and then I might watch or listen or read. But I will absolutely never accept a copy with DRM. And I think DRM should be forbidden. Digital restrictions management is evil because software designed to restrict us is evil. And open, well, I've never been an advocate of open source, and I don't know precisely what they mean when they say that this DRM software is open. It could mean various possible things. If it were actually free software, and the idea is that, yes, you all can decrypt the DRM, we're just asking you, please, not to do that unless you sent us some money, maybe that's okay. You know, if they're making some money, but they're not actually restricting people and controlling people, maybe that's okay. It depends on the details, which I don't know. What was the biggest challenge you faced when developing free software? Well, first of all, developing free software is not a thing of the past. People are doing that now, still. That's not what I do. in the 1990s, I was involuntarily self-promoted into management. But we are still doing it. Now, there was no overall big challenge. It was simply a lot of work. But, of course, specific parts were challenges. Some specific parts required somebody to do reverse engineering, and that's still the case now. There is a free version of Android, but it has to have device drivers for the peripherals of any given model of telephone. And that work is lagging behind. We need more people. This university should teach classes. Every university that teaches people about software development should teach reverse engineering. Maybe not to everybody, but the people who are interested in learning that, who want a real challenge to learn to do things that most programmers don't know how to do. That should be taught. There should be a workshop where people do reverse engineering projects, they get help, and they write down the results. Universities should help students learn to make important contributions to society. You just lost an opportunity to sell GNU model because you don't have a UPI payment system. Well, I don't think I mean, we arranged someone else to act as an intermediary to do it. Unless something went wrong, we didn't lose it. Well, I can't imagine the loss people will incur if they don't use those systems, because I am someone who doesn't use those systems. No one can make me do it, and yet I always manage to get things done somehow. But it's not hard to write free software for such systems. What's hard is the business part. If you wanted to set up a thing like that, you have to have a giant business behind it. But we are, in fact, we have developed, in fact, an anonymous payment system, which since last year is officially approved for operation in Switzerland. In Switzerland now, you can get a bank account that connects with GNU Taler, and you can buy Taler tokens, and then you can spend them with any merchant who has signed up with this system, and you make an anonymous payment, but it's anonymous only for the payer. It's not like a cryptocurrency. It's not anonymous for the payee. We don't want this to help billionaires hide their wealth. And so we designed it so it can't be used for that. But it does enable you making an ordinary daily size payment to do it anonymously. Now, the sad thing is, I can't do it because I'm not Swiss. I have no connection with Switzerland, except that I visit there once in a while. But this is the first step. The next thing is, other countries have to see that this is much better than cryptocurrencies, precisely because it doesn't help rich people hide their wealth from taxes. It's designed so that the payee, the store, has to identify itself for each transaction. So the store's income is calculated. They can't tell who paid it, but that doesn't matter for the taxes that the store is supposed to pay. This is called GNU Taler, and for more information, look at taler.net. You spoke of digitization of identity as though Aadhaar as an encroachment of freedom. Yes, it is. How would one identify subtle encroachments of our freedom through digital means? Well, that's an open-ended problem. And there may be questions to deal with that I've never thought about yet. and that I don't know about yet. But it's a matter of asking, if we adopt this system, what power does anyone get to do things to people? Now, if you're concerned with surveillance and tracking of people, take a look at China. China has put tremendous effort into controlling everybody by means of digital tracking and surveillance. And so one thing you'll see is that using facial recognition to identify people, even on the street, is vicious. Prohibiting people from covering their faces is vicious. Requiring identification to do everyday things, like take the metro. In China, you have to show your ID to get on the metro. And in China, mostly people don't pay cash anymore. They have really pushed hard to get rid of cash. And the purpose of this is tyranny. And it's not really very disguised, although in China people are not allowed to complain about this. They'd be censored. You spoke about bullshit generators generate BS code. Well, not only code. Most of the time, bullshit generators are not generating code. They're generating human language text. But it can still be bullshit, meaning full of errors, full of fabrications that have nothing to do with truth. A lawyer tried using one of these to find the cases to refer to as backup for a brief. Well, the bullshit generator generated references to non-existent cases, which was very embarrassing when this lawyer submitted that brief. Your thoughts on developers contributing to free software by using bullshit generation? The problem is the code won't work. So it's less of a problem in free software because the other users will find it doesn't work. They'll read the code. They'll replace it with correct code. That's one of the advantages of free software. The users are not helpless prisoners. They can just fix it. But when it happens in a proprietary program, the users can't see the garbage, let alone fix it. There's a war on cash happening in India. How can we fight back? Look carefully in each situation for how you can avoid or minimize the use of any digital systems. I don't live here. In fact, on this trip, I haven't had the occasion to go to a store and buy anything. So I don't know what the situation is. You have to do this thinking. But part of what you have to do is, in dealing with politics, demand anonymous payment in everyday life. Now the next question is how GNU Taller can ensure sovereignty like cache, meaning how it avoids third-party approval. Well, Taller does require third-party approval in a system, but the only thing the system, when it distributes Taller tokens to users who pay for them, it has no idea what they're going to spend those tokens on. So it can't judge people based on that. And then when these people do spend those dollar tokens, they're paying those to some merchant. Well, it is possible for the system to refuse to accept certain merchants. It can have rules, but then the government can simply say it's illegal to sell this product. Like suppose you wanted to buy a drug or a gun, well, the government can have laws about that, and that doesn't depend on dollar. If the government wants to say to stores, you're not allowed to sell guns, well, it already will do that. What inspired you to launch the GNU project in 1983, and what were your initial goals? I had been working in a free software community all through the 1970s, so I knew what that life was like, but that community had basically collapsed and it was gone. And that software that we had been using and developing was obsolete. And I was left with nothing to look forward to in life. I knew that if I surrendered and became part of the system of non-free software, I would be ashamed of everything I did, because everything I did subsequently would be helping some company put its chains on people, and I would be morally troubled by everything I was doing, and I would hate it. And with that as the alternative, it was easy to decide I was going to fight as hard as I could, because then, even if I lost, I knew, even if I lost, I would be proud of trying. I would feel that my life was being good for something. And the initial goal was to develop a complete Unix-like operating system that was entirely free, the GNU system. And by the way, GNU is a recursive acronym. That's why I chose the name GNU. We had a tradition in our community. You could call a system, for instance, there was Tint. We had a text editor called Tico. Someone developed a similar program and called it Tint, which stood for Tint is not Tico. And we enjoyed that so much that we made lots of other recursive acronyms. So GNU is a recursive acronym. It stands for GNU's Not Unix. The first recursive acronym with a contraction in it. What are the benefits of using free software to developers and communities? Well, the benefit to developers is if they make money through development of free software, or if they do it not as a business, they are treating the users justly. They are not predators looking for opportunities to mistreat and take advantage of the users who will run their code. And as for the community, the users have the benefits of freedom. They are not helplessly under the power of the developer of that particular program. Can you suggest some free softwares that gives something I don't know what, security to users? Well, free software is generally very good for security if you understand the word security thoughtfully. Companies say that they're working to protect your security, but security against whom? They mean security against third parties. But what about security against that company? Well, proprietary software will never give you that, because that developer can change the program. It can force on you changes that are bad for you, that are designed to be harmful to you. And So it reached the point that since, in Microsoft 10, Microsoft admitted that it could forcibly change the software, that users had no way to refuse. And these changes have often been malicious. That is, they've been designed so that they hurt the users and users don't want them. But users have come to take it for granted. Of course this company has power over me. How else could it be? Well, free software is how else it can be. With free software, none of the developers of the program have any power over you. If you don't trust them anymore, you don't have to use any changes that they make. Of course, to make that complete, you need to insist on using standard, or at least whether it's an official standard or an informal standard, it has to be a standard protocol for communications so that that company can't implement some special, unusual protocol and screw you because you don't have the support for that. This is what I believe it was Sony did with the PlayStation. They released it so that you could either run their proprietary games or you could install GNU plus Linux on it. But then they discovered that people were using GNU plus Linux to figure out the secret protocol used by the games. So they changed that protocol. And then if you installed the new implementation of gaming support, you would lose the ability to run GNU/Linux on the machine. So they basically said, this product gives you two forms of use. Oh, but starting today, you can only have one or the other. You can't have them both. Now, this was using a software change to reduce the functionality of what they had sold you already. They could do that because it was running non-free software. Non-free software enables all sorts of nastiness. You've probably heard of dark patterns. For the most obvious example is when you can subscribe to something and the server makes you spend 20 minutes clicking around trying to finally be allowed to say, I cancel my subscription. Well, that's all possible because of non-free software. So if you understand the term security carefully, meaning security against anybody who might mistreat you, security, if security applies to security against anybody who might possibly mistreat you, it includes the developers of the software you're running, and only free software gives you that. In this era of rapidly evolving technology, how can we survive without adapting to newer technologies like digital currency and portable devices? It's the opposite. Those things take advantage of people and harm people. They're designed for that. And so the only way we can avoid being mistreated by technology is by refusing. If you say, we're weak, we have no choice but to accept changed technology when they hand it out, you're basically saying, we're totally at your mercy, developers, companies. Screw us any way you like. That's a dead end. It leads to a worse and worse life. So you must be ready to say no, and you must organize to say no. What is your opinion about piracy? Well, there used to be a big problem of piracy near the east coast of Africa. And I think they stamped that out by putting soldiers, at least some of the time, on ships and fighting back. I'm completely in favor of that. Piracy is a form of robbery and kidnapping, and it should be stamped out. As for what I think of movie piracy, well, I liked the first Pirates of the Caribbean. I didn't like the second one because I love parrots, and they had a parrot that was a villain. I didn't like that at all. Basically, the idea of calling people who share pirates, it's business's way of saying that sharing with your neighbor makes you as bad as people who attack ships. Well, that's absolute nonsense. I refuse to endorse that perverted view. I hope you will refuse also. Sharing is good. Stopping people from sharing is evil. How to educate people about pure free software versus open source concepts. Talk with people about these philosophical distinctions. There is in gnu.org/philosophy/not open source misses the point.html. I think gnu.org/not open source is a link to that. That article explains in depth and in detail precisely what is similar between open source and free software and precisely what is different, both at the level of specific details and at the level of concepts and philosophy. How to encourage us of open source software, or use of open source software or development in a society where, well, I don't try to encourage use of open source software, ever. Many of those programs are, in fact, free, and I try to encourage use of them because they're free software. But I never do that using the term open source because I want people to be aware of the philosophical moral difference. In a society where people trade safety for convenience, well, you know, the fool and his freedom are soon parted, and we can't really stop that, but we can help encourage people not to do it by A, refusing to do that yourself, and B, telling other people what you're doing and why, and they may be amazed to encounter someone who doesn't value convenience above everything else. But when they think about that, they may decide to learn from it. Can free software contribute to making AI more transparent and accountable? Well, it can if you're talking about real AI, like the program that will look at an image of some tissue and tell you whether it's cancerous, or look at a picture of an insect and tell you if that's the kind of Asian hornet that kills lots of honeybees. Yeah, you could modify that and maybe make it better. But if you're talking about bullshit generators, we don't want to make them better. We want to get them out of our lives. What does the Free Software Foundation play in developing, again, it's this propaganda word, AI. Well, if we're talking about bullshit generators, we don't want to have anything to do with developing that. The Free Software Foundation does not mainly develop software. We do the other things that are important in our movement. Because there are lots of volunteers developing software that's free. How do you define free software and what are the core principles behind this concept? Well, that was in the video. If you want to watch the video again, you can get it at fsf.org/TEDx, because that was originally a TEDx talk. How do you respond to critics who say that free software is impractical and unrealistic? Well, all the software I use is free, so it's got to be fairly practical and realistic. I could understand how people could make these claims if we were, in 1983 when I was only talking about doing it. it's like saying, well, you know, I don't believe we can have jet airplanes flying around. It's impractical and unrealistic. If something's actually happening, it's got to be practical and realistic. Now, it can have disadvantages. That's a different question. How can we assure security while development on, well, he says open source. I'm not going to repeat that term. Actually, as I pointed out, you can't ever trust the security of non-free software because it's the secret of some company, and there's no way anyone else can verify its security or fix it to be more secure. And when they talk about security, there's always a blind spot. They're not talking about your security against them. And that's where non-free softwares tends to have really bad security, intentional failures to have any security. But it's also full of bugs that nobody found because nobody else was allowed to look. So security is one of the advantages of free software. These, that was already done. You spoke about bullshit chatter. That one I already answered. I shouldn't have put them at the end of this. Okay, that one I already answered. RMS does not use a cell phone, does not use digital payment, does not own a car, does not missing. Yeah, how is the quality of your life? It's reasonably good. I live in a city where there is public transport, and I'd much rather sit for a while on a train, sitting down and using my computer, than spend the time driving. I can't possibly use the computer while driving. It would be ridiculous and dangerous. But it's perfectly safe for me to use my computer while I'm sitting on a train. And if I have to stand, well, I'll always have a magazine with me I can read. Once in a while, there are annoying things. Because there's so much internet selling, there are some products that are hard to get in any other way. Now, until we have toller payments to make, nowadays purchasing anything online requires identifying yourself, and it generally requires running non-free JavaScript code. Well, I'm not going to do that, but sometimes I need those products. Well, I try hard to find a place I can get such a product without ordering online. For instance, I know a bookstore where they will let me order a book for me anonymously if I pay them cash in advance. They give me a receipt. And later I come back and I pick up the book. They don't know who I am, which is fine. There are other bookstores that won't do that, so I don't go to them to buy. But when things like that can't work, I have plenty of friends who don't try to reject this unjust system. And I know they're not going to listen to me because I've always tried pointing out to them that they're giving up freedom. So at that point, occasionally I'll ask a friend, could you order this for me? And I just pay my friend in cash. Well, at least I have avoided running the non-free software, and I have avoided being tracked. Now, if enough people started refusing, that might create a market for some store to sell these things physically, as used to be done. But cars are a real problem of non-free software. There's lots of non-free software in a car, and it's a surveillance tracking system, a so-called connected car. That means it has I believe these are cellular data connections, and their movements are tracked. And probably the thing has a GPS, and it's probably sending every so often to the manufacturer where you are. Now, this should be illegal. If we had governments that wanted to protect our freedom, they would simply make it illegal to manufacture a car or sell a car with such systems. And that would solve that problem. But what I recommend for car owners is to have a mechanic disconnect all the antennas in the car, except perhaps for a radio antenna. You know, if that's all the antenna is there for, is to listen to the radio, it's not doing you any harm. You should also disconnect the car's own GPS, because if something built into the car is indicating your location, it's probably also recording all the locations where you have been, and next time you take it to an authorized dealer, software that the dealer doesn't even have any control over will download from your car the whole list and send that to the manufacturer. And so if you disconnect the GPS antenna or the GPS system or whatever in your car, then it won't do that. And then if you want to track your GPS, your location for your own GPS, for your own purposes, you can do that with a separate system that won't send the information to anybody. By the way, commercial GPS and map products have been found to transmit your location history to that manufacturer. You can't trust any product with non-free software in it. Some of them may, in fact, be innocent, but you can't assume that. You should never expect that to be true. It's not the usual case nowadays. Your work and philosophy has inspired many of us in Kerala to endorse and discuss about free software. We have a vibrant group of free software enthusiasts, and we also talk about free software in our monthly offline meetups. If you plan to visit us again, you are very much welcome to attend one of our meetups at kochifos.org. Well, if you want to give me an email address, I could perhaps let you know if I'm going to be here again. So that's what I'd like you to give me. Looking at a website frequently, I don't have time to do that. But the other thing is, I noticed that the name says FOSS, Free and Open Source Software. That name has a number of disadvantages as a way of spreading the ideas of free software. Look at gnu.org/philosophy/ I think it says flossandfoss.org, .html. Let me check in my computer the correct name. Yes, it's gnu.org/philosophy/flossandfoss.html. So you'll have noticed that I don't use these terms. The terms are designed to refer to both free software and open source. I don't do that because I want to promote the free software movement and its philosophical moral ideas. I want to focus my promotion on that as much as possible because business generally talks about open source, right? We have to somehow compete with that for mind share. We want to remind people This is about freedom, and mere openness is only a part of that. So I never promote open source. What you do is up to you. I just want you to understand that with this choice of name, you're choosing that course of action. And I would like to suggest that you consider focusing more on promoting the idea of freedom. Maybe you can work in the word swatantra as a way of emphasizing that and making it clearer. It looks like there are no more questions. So I guess I am done. Thank you for being here. Please join the Free Software Foundation at fsf.org. We need your support.
With a lot of love, respect, and admiration from Jain University, thank you. Thank you for being here with us today.